On this Fat Tuesday for an insightful night on viewability and a delightful night on the roof. My name is Phil Meyer. I've had the distinct pleasure of being the central lead here in Magnetic Chicago for the past year and a half. For those of you who joined us last year for our inaugural event, Attribution Revolution, you know this is the CEO of Magnetic to my right, James Green, who will be steering the conversation tonight. Prior to Magnetic, James steered a different ship, the 55-foot catamaran Aldine, with his wife and 2 children around the world, touring the 7 seas. So I'd like to welcome James and make him earn his beads tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you all for coming. My favorite thing about this evening is that we booked this room that had a back wall to it, and they removed the back wall. So thank you for coming, because we had overflow and we had to add a whole bunch of seats. I'm sorry for you guys in the back. Next time we'll go bigger. We have a great evening for you this evening. We've got 4 panelists. I'm going to introduce them now so you can all say hi. Though we're actually not going to bring them up yet because they would be blinded by the projector. So we've got a bit from every part of our ecosystem, I think. We have Phil from VivaKi. Phil. So VivaKi, as I'm sure you know, one of the biggest trading desks, really focused on RTB and programmatic and audience buying, and really familiar with what it takes to buy real people in real time. We have Dave from Integral. So Dave is one of the founders of Integral Ad Science, whose entire reason to be is to make sure that you're buying the right thing. You don't buy it on the wrong site. You don't buy it with the wrong people. And we're going to start this evening with an interesting experiment from him. We're going to take a few bets in the house, which will be fun for the evening. Next, we have Chris from Sovrn, recently Scott. Chris. I've been at the bar. Scott from Sovrn, used to be Federated, now Sovrn, focused exclusively now on RTB, used to be on the publisher side, representing conversational media. Now they've separated these 2 companies out. And finally, we have Gian, who is one of the émissions grise at comScore. Been a great partner for us here. They've got big partnerships they've developed with Google. They started out with Panel. Now they're doing all sorts of real-time research and really a key player in making sure that you buy real people and make sure that you have real measurement and making sure that you're able to measure digital with other media that you're buying. We're going to start out. Dave from Integral has a fantastic experiment. So I'm going to guess that all of you have heard about little botnets and things like this. We actually have one live here tonight with us. And Dave is going to demonstrate it. So we're going to turn one on. And we are. We're going to turn one on. We're going to see how it works. And we're going to have bets. And, I don't know, free drinks for the one who gets it right. We're going to have bets about how many ads this little botnet that we've captured in a jar will actually view. So with that, Dave, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So can we take a bet on the free sail around the world on your catamaran?
Oh my catamaran.
Because I'm more interested.
Sure.
Anyone who asks questions, can we ask more about James' illustrious life as a sailor rather than viewability? So hi, everyone. As James mentioned, I'm from Integral Ad Science, and one of the focuses of our product portfolio is really to help buyers, sellers, platforms clean up and manage the volume of fraud that's in the industry today. I think that you probably have to be buried under a rock not to know and read about all the problems and the challenges that advertisers and sellers are faced with fraud. And as part of our research, when we look to develop products to help combat fraud, and it can be managed and it can be fought effectively, we go out and we establish what we call honeypots and machines that are infected with known bots. For those of you that don't know what a bot is essentially a piece of code or a program that installs itself onto a computer that essentially infects that computer. And what it does is it allows somebody else, not you, to take control of that computer. So what I've done is I've logged in to this infected computer. I'm using a program called TeamViewer, which allows me to remote log into a machine that is based in one of our labs in New Jersey. And for those of you who are not from New Jersey, every form of criminal activity happens in New Jersey. So as Tony Soprano showed us. And what this shows you is essentially the desktop of that machine. So it's a Windows-based machine. It's got a bunch of different browsers installed, Internet Explorer, et cetera, et cetera. And what we typically find with malware that is used to infect machines is that it targets Windows machines more often than it does Mac machines. It targets types of browsers that have security vulnerabilities, older versions of Internet Explorer, et cetera, et cetera. And so this user who's looking at this machine, as you can see, is not doing anything right now. There's no browser open. There's no Word documents open. They're not doing any work. And what I'll do is I'll ask Becky to flip to a Chrome browser, which will actually start analyzing the processes that are running on this infected machine using some technology that we've developed. So if you click Start, we are now basically starting. That shouldn't happen. Have you got internet connection? Oh, yeah. No, it's good. We're good. Sorry. So what we've done is we've activated this analysis now that is starting to analyze the processes that are running on this machine. So there was a blank screen that you saw, and this browser is looking at what's going on behind that blank screen. And as you can see, that machine is loading web pages. And those web pages are serving ads. But nobody is actually seeing those ads. Those ads are being served by a machine, by the bot that's infected that. The cool experiment, which gets a free ride around the world on James's boat, is that we have installed an ad blocker in this browser, in that little hand over there. And what you can do is you can start counting the number of ads that this bot is serving. So since I started the bot, it served 24. And we're going to let that cook. Kind of feel like I'm on an Oprah show. We're going to let that cook, and we're going to come back to it at the end of the panel, and we'll see how many ads this bot has generated. All right?
All right.
So
there you go. So just to reiterate a couple of those things, this is looking at the output of that computer. So that is what you would see if you're logged into that computer, and it's just looking at the IP traffic that's coming out of the back of it. So you would never see the browser open. Now, before you guys sit down, we have a short video we're going to run to introduce the panel, and then we're going to go do the panel. Can we roll the video?
Real-time audience buying is here to stay. Marketers cannot put the genie back in the bottle. Buying audiences is more efficient, it's personalized, it's more cost-effective. You choose who sees your ad, not what content gets your dollars, and it's priced dynamically. Because RTB is so dynamic, it's become the victim of click fraud, and questions have arisen about whether an ad is seen or not. Viewability issues impact the entire display ecosystem, and these challenges run deep, from click fraud and suspicious traffic in RTB to ad laundering and as much as 50% of ads going unseen. Marketers face concerns about wasted media dollars, quality and transparency. Publishers fear cannibalization.
Fast forward 10 years later to the rise of the display programmatic ad tech ecosystem, and it's a very similar story. So the ability for fraudsters to essentially run the same playbook that they ran with search is even larger in terms of its scale and potential disruptive impact.
Viewability really is the baseline. It's the first metric that we want to understand once the ad is served. We can't begin to understand performance or model attribution without knowing if the ad had an opportunity to be seen.
Here we are, supposedly the most measurable of media, and yet we really don't have strong industry standards as to knowing whether or not someone's actually seen an ad.
Right now, the currency in the market is a served impression. With the viewable impression standard and the viewable currency, there'll be a shift from paying for ads on a served basis to paying for ads that are in view. And that over time, there'll be multiple viewability standards. For brand advertisers, there might be a need to have an ad that's in view for 5 seconds and 100% of the creative. For certain direct response advertisers, it might be less than a second just to initiate the response.
My belief is if there was no fraud in the system whatsoever, or if we quashed it down, call it to 5% or sub 5%, which is about what everyone agrees search is right now, that the true quality value of a high quality publisher would out, and the CPMs will start to go up dramatically.
Despite viewability challenges, RTB is the fastest growing part of the digital advertising ecosystem and will exceed nearly $8.5 billion by 2017. We must know we will preserve the power of real-time buying, and we will solve for viewability.
All right, let's begin. Everyone have a seat. Thank you very much. Maybe a little light. Excellent. Okay, so Scott, I'm going to start with you for this first question. So, with a little intro. Viewability has always been an issue. In case you thought it was just focused on digital, one of my favorite stats, because I'm old enough to have known this, is like 25, even 30 years ago, there were measurements done in Los Angeles that showed that water usage went up every time an ad was shown on televisions before the internet, right? So why is that? Because everyone's flushing the toilet because they went and didn't see the ad, right? So it's not that viewability has been suddenly invented by digital media. It has not, right? It's always been an issue. But Scott, let's talk about RTB and why RTB is so powerful, why it's so important, and put into that why viewability is becoming an issue, or is an issue.
No, it's a good question, especially for us. I mean, in the recent split we had with Federated Media, and where Gian is chairman of Sovrn, RTB and our SSP stack creates efficiencies in the marketplace, especially from a reach and scale perspective. And the Federated Media aspect with the direct sales team and the content marketing division was very high touch. Didn't scale very well. It's not a terrible business, actually. There's a lot of creativity happening. But when you take a look at some of the efficiencies that we're able to gain, especially on behalf of our publishers and the larger network, we can transact to 2 billion ad requests a day. Sometimes it goes in auction, sometimes it goes in chain. And you think about that, it really takes a burden off a lot of the, especially in our network, the small publishers who do not have direct sales teams who are able to go through and help monetize their inventory. The challenge that we have or we've had on viewability is clearly part of it's an education aspect from a publisher perspective. Some of the small publishers don't know where to place ad tags oftentimes, and that's us educating on best practices. The other challenge, obviously, we have is from a viewability and fraud perspective, we have to have extensive toll gates in place in order for when publishers do sign up. And just for example, we, since January 1st, have blocked, I believe, is about 2,400 sites coming into the network, and another 7,000 we purged from the network. And that's an ongoing basis. Google's numbers are much bigger than ours because they're much bigger. But so it's an ongoing basis, and we do that intentionally because we absolutely do believe that the publishers who are going out and doing these things in a very legitimate way, their CPMs are eroding because of the actions.
So yeah, one of my favorite quotes when John was on the panel last time was that he actually started saying how much money he's lost by controlling for that, right? So the sort of 10, 15, 20% cut in revenue to what was then Federated, now Sovrn, just by being a good player in the ecosystem. In other words, that's the incentive that everyone has to keep it going. Now, a question for Jen, and then David, I'm going to have you follow up. And for those of you that haven't been to these events before, I like to go out to the audience and have you ask questions. So this is going to be pretty damn boring if we just sit up here and talk to each other all evening long. We really want you to participate. So I'm going to ask these two questions, then I'm going to go out to the audience, and after each subject matter, I'm going to have you ask you if you have any questions, and hopefully you've drunk enough that you're brave enough to ask some questions. Jen, from comScore's perspective, what's a definition of viewability, and what are the things that you've got that you're offering around it?
Yeah. So we start with the example that you just saw in this machine here. We have 2 million computers around the world that we measure in real time, so we know what's going on a site-by-site basis, and that's an important part of our ability to measure whether or not an ad is in view. Now, the definition is that an ad is not in view if a bot is seeing it, because it's not a human. That's one aspect of it. But there's more to it. So if an ad is served by the ad server, loaded onto the browser, but it's below the screen, if you will, and the page is long and the user doesn't scroll down, never sees the ad, that's another example of an ad. If a user clicks off a page before the ad is rendered, that's another example. So you put all of those together and you have you have the component that's not viewed. And the numbers are pretty big. So we've now measured this around the world, billions and billions of impressions, and it's about 46% of the ads that are served are in view. So over a half of them, are not. And the percentage in view varies pretty dramatically by the size of the site. So the premium sites have a higher in-view rate. It runs somewhere in the mid-50s. But boy, when you start getting down into the middle and down to the tail, and you get out on the exchanges especially, the viewability rates drop pretty dramatically down to like 30%. So which means that 70% of what's being paid for is just never seen by a person. So it's a major issue. I think if we can get a hold of it, though, the upside is pretty significant. Because think about it this way. If that many ads have never been seen, and yet the ad server delivered numbers are the ones that are plugged into these market mix models to try to figure out what the impact of digital is. Imagine if the right numbers were being plugged in. You'd get a much, much better estimate of the impact of digital. I mean, it could be twice as high. One of our clients, Kellogg's, has quoted the stats that they are seeing. And not just as a part of visibility, but with making sure that the ads are delivered to the right target with the right frequency, which can also go wrong.
Yep.
They're increasing the ROI on their digital spend by factors of 5 to 6. So that's how big the improvement is that's possible if we can get a handle on this.
David, you got anything you want to add to that? You look at the same problem from a slightly different point of view?
Yeah, so I mean, the way in which we define viewability is somewhat standardized by the IAB. 50% of the creative for greater than 1 second has to be in view to a user, to a person. In other words, not to a machine or not to some unethical practice of delivery that would qualify as a viewable impression. I think when we think about viewability, though, we think about it in a number of different ways. So there's firstly the measurement piece, which we think is relevant and very important. Being able to measure, being able to account, being able to use it as a currency for billing or reconciliation or planning practices is relevant and extremely important to the industry, and I think it's a great step in the right direction. But one of the things that the video mentioned, that James was talking on, and one of the things that we've talked about as an industry for years is this notion of one-to-one marketing or one-to-one targeting, and being able to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Measurement is a very reactive way of looking at things, and with the migration towards RTB and the migration towards real-time decision-making around buying and selling of media, viewability becomes an incredibly important component in that. Now, to measure an ad as being in view for 50% of the creative and greater than 1 second is one step. But to be able to determine the value of that impression based on the likelihood of the viewability or the probability of the viewability could mean a lot of different things and a lot of different value for different advertisers. Procter & Gamble's brand might have a very specific requirement around viewability of 5 seconds and be willing to pay for that. Sprint might be a direct response type approach, which they just need 1 second to elicit a response. Being able to dynamically bid in RTB, being able to dynamically target in RTB around viewability, which is one of the things that we do and have integrated across the ecosystem with, allows our advertisers to create dynamic pricing, which means that every impression has a value. It doesn't mean it's 0 or 1. it has a value depending on how much viewability might be important to your particular campaign.
All right, so I'm going to go out to the audience. We've talked about various different types of viewability. We've talked about above the fold, below the fold, about ad stuffing, about bots and other kinds of things. Any questions so far before we start talking about measurement? And I'm going to go to Phil next. Any questions yet? No? Back in the back. Oh, yes, over here. Back left. Yeah. Can you tell us who you are and what you do? And
becomes more and more relevant to our media plans, and more video inventory becomes available and is being bought programmatically as well. Where are we with video and mobile as well?
Phil, I'm going to go to you on this one. So question, just to make sure everyone heard all of it, is, banners fine. What about video?
So the reality of what we're talking about today is additional advancements within the digital marketplace. We talk about RTB, but the reality is just more interconnectivity between buy side and sell side, and additional companies that could help with additional measurement along the way, which I think we all would say is a positive evolution, right? This didn't exist necessarily 5 years ago, but where it keeps continuing to evolve is really exciting. That's why we're happy to speak today and have this type of discussion. When we talk about viewability or any other measurement, there's going to be technology challenges depending on the device or the ad format that exists. There's certainly a lot of work that's being done specifically for viewability or any sort of like audience verification within the video space. And there's companies that are trying to create products and services that are able to effectively view in similar fashion, detect fraudulent behavior, detect if the ad was in view, define what viewability should mean. Does it mean, in that case, a certain number of seconds played through for the video? And again, that will continue to be developed, those type of standards. VivaKi is part of this open VB forum that is trying to help guide the IAB for these type of standards. And I think what we'll see in the coming months is a release of what those standards are. Those standards are going to be a guideline, certainly on a case-by-case basis for the advertiser. For the publisher, they may have more scrutiny, less scrutiny for whatever those requirements are. But there certainly are companies that are making progress for video measurement, including the viewability side.
Yeah, so I just want to add, the technology exists today for video. We have it. We're one of the vendors that provide video viewability technology. The standards, to Phil's point, are not finalized yet, but the technology to measure video viewability exists today. We follow the current proposed standard, as well as for mobile, both web and in-app exists today. And so the ability to do cross-channel viewability measurement from a technology perspective is available. It's really more about the standards and the definitions of what that means for buyers and sellers to transact, to come to an agreement right now.
Just one comment on the standard, which is interesting. So we've done a fair amount of work looking at what happens if you change the percentage of pixels in view, and what happens if you change the length of time. So right now the standard, or the IAB standard, is 50% of pixels in view for a second. A second isn't too long, right? As we said, it might work for a direct response kind of campaign, but for branding it seems to be too short. So one of our clients wanted to know what happens to the impact of the ad if you start varying that definition. And it's pretty clear that you can get a bigger sales impact if the ad is in view longer than a second. You can also get a bigger impact if more than 50% of the pixels are in view. Now, it kind of raises the question, should there be just one standard, right? I mean, I could see some creative publishers saying, look, I'm going to guarantee, Mr. Client, I'm going to guarantee you an even tighter definition, all right? I only pay for the ads that are in view 10 seconds, because you'll get a better sales lift for it. And I wonder whether that wouldn't help push up the prices, because what's not happening, this is kind of anecdotal, but at least what I'm hearing, around the industry is the advertisers and the agencies are not willing right now to pay a premium for a viewable ad. They're asking for guarantees against it, but I think the view is, wait a minute, does the 50% in view, does this mean that for the past decade, a half of what I've been paying for is worthless? How can I suddenly now pay a premium, right?
So I just want to make that, this is one of my favorite points, so I just want to emphasize it because I'm a cup half full kind of guy. And that's an amazing opportunity. So just think about that. The price of an ad that's seen is the same as a price of an ad that isn't seen. And by the way, at Magnetic, we see the same thing. So we're integrated with Integral. We use comScore. We use all these various things. We have our own technology as well we use. But we see when we bid for ads that when we detect that it isn't, that it is one we would want to buy versus it is not one we would want to buy, that the price is the same.
But that will change.
It will change, but today,
it has to change.
I mean, I'm sorry, but Q1 2014.
Correct. And here's actually,
you should all go buy, make sure that you're buying.
There's
because the price is going to go up.
Opportunity now for buyers, right? More so than for sellers.
Yeah.
But two thoughts, right? The first is, from a buy-side perspective, the way in which you're evaluating performance, at least the clients that we speak to, has some potential pitfalls, right? View-through and click-through attribution is not going to reward your publishers who are actually driving causal conversions to your campaign or to your product. So that return on ad spend or that return on investment equation needs to be thought of from an agency's perspective. RTB is in the second or third innings of where it will be, 3-4 years from now.
So that was actually
and that allows your dynamic pricing to start happening.
That was going to be
that's exactly
my next
the
question.
point.
So I'm going to ask the
Sorry.
question.
No, I mean that's exactly the point. And the question was really from video and whether it was premium. I mean these are technologies that we can deploy at scale. But the question really is going to be, do we readjust floor prices on behalf of publishers from an RTB perspective and say that this is viewable, therefore we should set the floor higher, and that's a programmatic premium? It really isn't, right? We can get into a definition of terms. But I do believe on what you were saying as well is that we've also seen that there's a pay and spray at very low 10-cent, sub 10-cent CPMs. For inventory impressions that are below the quote-unquote scroll, right, where the viewability is going to be much lower. And we're finding in some of the data that the marketers are okay with that, right? So the question really becomes, once the standards are built into the platforms and the platforms from the DSPs, the SSPs, and the exchanges are talking the exact same language, at that point will we see that there's going to be floor adjustments against these types of metrics.
Why can't it be purely based on supply and demand, though?
Well, but that's the issue, right? I mean, the expectation was that defining an impression as viewable would cut down on the supply and prices would go up. Theoretically, that's the law of supply and demand, and it should work, but I think that it's kind of taking it out of context. You've got to put it back into the context of advertisers and agencies saying, wait a minute, I can't just forget the past decade, so that affects what I'm willing to pay. And you'd really have to have a big impact on the amount of inventory that's available to really change that equation. The other thing is, remember, this isn't actually the first medium that's had this issue. I'll go back to your example of ad breaks on television. Remember, for the longest time, the only TV ratings you could get were the show ratings.
Yep.
And so you were paying on the basis of the show ratings, and yet the ad break came on, and suddenly your audience dropped 15%, right? So I don't remember prices dramatically changing, around that. So you can't ignore, I guess, bottom line, you can't ignore the history of what's been the reality of this industry when you're looking at what might happen in the future.
I think that's exactly right. Phil?
So how many people still use cassette players these days, right? I mean, those existed not that long ago, 10, 15 years, I don't know, right? And I think what we're trying to, the theme of today's session and hopefully subsequent dialogue is, how do we think about the evolution of this space? And one of the worst case scenarios is for someone to say, well, I didn't have this measurement before available, whether you're on the buy side, sell side, or tools in between. I didn't have this measurement prior, and so I don't want to think about what this could mean, right? The whole point tonight is about knowing that these types of tools exist and that it's going to take a adoption period for the buy side and sell side to understand what do these numbers for viewability or signals for viewability influencing, suspicious activity or fraudulent activity. What does that really mean tied to all my client-specific strategy and campaigns? And as that dialogue continues to happen, which is what we're trying to encourage tonight, then on a case-by-case basis, we can start seeing and quantifying what's the value of audience, what's the value of this content, how should we think about pricing. But it's looking at these measurements, at these signals in a unified fashion and trying to be more informed. It's not one versus the other.
Absolutely. So let me go back to the audience, see if we have any more questions so far. Yeah, over there. Yeah. And then Summer, you're next.
Thank you.
This isn't necessarily about fraud, but more about RTB, and some things that I've seen with certain DSPs in the past is this idea that you have multiple ad impressions showing on the same page, and you don't really have the ability to control it as much on the buy side as you do on the sell side, just flicking a switch in whatever your data serving platform is, but you can't do it necessarily on the buy side. So when you have a specific cross-channel messaging strategy and you have different ads that are rotating that might have different messaging that are being shown at the same point in time to the same audience, it can create some issues. So again, not related to fraud, but just thoughts about being able to better control that from a buy side.
Phil, I think you're the best person here,
Sure.
as you're the buyer on the panel.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, right, that's it may be a publisher or a media seller that is potentially transacting through multiple exchanges and SSPs, including their direct activity. And so, what we see is sometimes that's the case, and it's tough for buyers to try and manage, what effectively becomes an accidental roadblock or, frequency management and whatnot. My belief is as more, publishers or media sellers are starting to align or allocate all of their remnant inventory through one particular exchange or SSP, we should see less of that. And I mean, there's been some recent announcements. I think it was back in maybe August, where News Corp was on a global side consolidating all through Rubicon. There was a recent announcement, I think last week, where Time Inc. was saying that they're consolidating through Google AdX. And so I think you're going to see less and less of that. But certainly that can be a reality of the space. And in some cases, that's the buyer strategy to try and own those type of executions. We've definitely seen that request on the VivaKi side, where people actually do want to run these type of roadblocks.
Summer, you got a question?
Yeah, maybe a loaded question. So, wait a second. So I get, sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to give you a mic just so the people in the
great.
back can hear you. There you go.
Okay, and this may be a very rudimentary kind of basic question. I'm coming from a project management side of things, and I support our digital marketing team. But when we talk about the online footprint and how well we are able to track things online, in addition to the baseline that you're talking about earlier as it relates to, we have a common price across the industry in terms of what we buy. Isn't there a way to track via IP or some other way in terms of where this malware is coming from, who's supporting the malware, and then how you can strategically buy or tweak your strategy moving forward? Are we not there yet? Is that, maybe I'm just not sure of what our knowledge is in that industry to date. So maybe just a basic understanding of what that is today, and then how we plan to mitigate that risk moving forward so that as we make future purchases, we're able to identify the malware in that industry to have that higher return on investment for your customers. Sorry, was that too much?
Yeah, so I'm going to have Gian and David answer this question. I'm going to try to repeat it just to make sure that we're all, no, it's good. So the question here is, how can you identify kind of, you said based on IP, but, whether it's URLs or physical addresses, how can you, what technology is there in place to make sure that once you identify that as a bad IP or a bad URL, you just stop serving ads to it, and will that be effective?
So I'm sure that there's work that's going on to develop those kind of automated systems, but I don't think they're there yet, but I think nonetheless, as the buyer, you can get what you want. Because if you're able to get the publisher, and I think the train has left the station on this, to only charge you for the viewable impressions, then you're okay, because you're only paying for the impressions that were seen by a human, right? And then I think what's important, though, which we really haven't talked about here, is really figuring out what that campaign is doing, and kind of, what is it doing to consumer buying or whatever other metric you would want to use that's important to you. But I think if you're only paying for the ads as a buyer, if you're only paying for the ads that were visible to a human, you got what you want, I think.
And certainly...
Is it based on serving up the ad, or is it based on the click-through?
Well...
Because if it's based on serving up the ad and you have that malware in the system, then that's pretty significant.
For those of you who've seen the stuff that I've said and written, I'm not a believer in the click on the display campaign. All the work that we've done shows no correlation between the click rates and the impact of the campaign. So I do think you still have a problem if you're using the click as the basis of what you will then pay. For that campaign, you still have a problem. But I think if you kind of move beyond that and pay on an impression basis, and you only paying on the viewable impressions, then I think you're fine.
So
David, you got anything to add?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll point out is that there is so much money being made by people who are defrauding this industry with fraudulent impressions that there is enough investment that they are making to make their technology fairly sophisticated. We're seeing that sometimes 10 to 15% of ads served by a bot are being measured as in view, which means if you're only looking at viewable technology without effective fraud detection, then you're actually paying for fraudulent ads. We look at between 2 and 3 billion impressions a day, and the only way to accurately detect fraud in our minds is by looking at impression level signals. When you're looking at a premium publisher, yes, you're fairly safe. The big publishers have typically 3 to 5% of fraud. Sometimes they do some extension networks, and the way in which the bots profile their audience, they visit ESPN or the New York Times or The Economist and so on and so forth. So you see very low and somewhat manageable levels in premium publisher. But hands up in this audience who's doing 100% of their buy directly to publishers. There's networks, there's exchanges, there's RTB platforms, and you don't have control over where and how your traffic is being assigned to your campaign. Majority of these bots they're able to complete subscription forms. So they can trick a system into thinking the ad is in view. Using an IP address or using a URL doesn't scale. If you block david.com from serving ads to your campaign, I'll notice it within 3, 4, 5 minutes that all of a sudden I've got no traffic coming to that site anymore. And I'll register david1.com and it'll be up and running in a matter of 10 minutes. Blacklists and IP address configurations and all those types of things work well when you have a one-to-one relationship with a publisher who controls their media. It doesn't scale beyond direct buy on ESPN or a direct buy on the New York Times. The minute you go through Turn or DoubleClick Bid Manager or ValueClick or any of the networks, you lose control over where your ads are going. And sometimes it can be 10 or 15 hops before your ad serves. So in our minds, you look at the impression level signals as the ad is being made, and you evaluate those signals in real time and take a decision on whether or not you put the ad there based on fraudulent activity.
So the only thing I would add to that is that it really comes down to what's the technology that you're using to try to detect whether an ad impression is valid or not. And I'll just go back to the example you had of one computer here. I mean, that's why we use a panel. That's why we have 2 million of these things around the world, because that, to us at least, is the only way you're really going to know what's happening at an individual site basis, is track what's going on a whole bunch of machines and that are visiting those individual sites, and then you have it.
So let's just dig a little deeper on something that I know that you will like, and perhaps because we're the oldest people in the room. That,
Oh, Brian Hayes is at the back.
Oh, there you go. He's in the same club. And I'll go to you for a question. But let's talk about metrics for a second, right?
Yeah.
So does it matter? I mean, you already said that it does, but let's focus on it a little more. What the metric is that you're using for success on the campaign, right? So if you're using click-through, if you're using view-through, if you're using some other metric, and what about using one of my favorite good old-fashioned brand lift, like taking surveys of people, what should people be doing? And surely some of these things, if you're actually measuring, did I sell more widgets, or did an audience do more? Surely those sorts of things are going to be more effective than, I don't know, the click-through rate, for example.
Right. Well, as I said,
if that wasn't too leading a question for you.
I love leading questions like that. I mean, personally and corporately, on the basis of the work that we've done, the click is just not the right metric to use. It just has no relationship to whether or not the campaign is going to be effective for display campaigns. I'm not talking about search. All right, so then the question is, well, what are you going to use, right? And to me, the only way of understanding what a campaign is doing is understanding what the consumer reaction is. And there are two ways to do that. You can gauge their attitudinal response by doing brand lift type surveys, and there's a whole ton of that stuff being done, and that gives you at least a direct feeling or an understanding, I should say, of what the campaign is doing at the consumer level. Is their purchase intent going up? Is the awareness going up? Is the favorability? All of those traditional branding metrics are used across all media, right? So that works well. But there's another thing that's actually happening that I think is even more powerful than that, and that's the use of cookie syncing, which is just exploding. And basically it allows you to link the cookie that's put on the machine when the impression is delivered to the knowledge of what that owner of that machine is doing in the offline world, maybe at buying at a retailer or advertiser CRM database. And what's really incredible about doing that is the scale at which you can do it is staggering. I mean, this isn't using an A/B test where you're looking at exposed versus unexposed and you're using 1,000 people. This is using millions of people. And the precision with which you can read the sales impact is staggering. And it seems to me that that's one of the best developments that we've had in terms of understanding how these campaigns are impacting consumers.
More questions from the audience? I got one back there. I know you had your hand up earlier.
Greg Jones, Carmichael Lynch, Minneapolis.
There you go. Please use the mic. All right. Then project loud.
Yeah, I project. So my question is, you're talking about metrics other than just what we typical delivery metrics. And my question is, using new technologies to look at metrics in a different way in order to show viewability or accomplish the goals you're looking to reach campaigns. For example, so if you're using a rich media video vendor, and looking at their proprietary metrics in order to show some sort of higher engagement, which can therefore show viewability. What is your example, or your experience, or your thoughts on doing something like almost like circumventing the system, going through one way of looking at your set metrics, or using those metrics to look at your campaign success?
I'm going to ask you to pick one of the panelists to answer your question. Come on, you can do it.
I can take it from
a
supply side. This
Scott.
is how we handle it. And the cookie sync is actually, we have 22 integrations with different trade desks and DSPs, and all of it's done through cookie sync matching, right? So we have a lot of retargeting happening in the network. To the use case you're describing, if we were talking about viewability, even under some of the rich media or native, what I would call native assets that we have with Federated, we still have these assets within our network, and the engagement rates, if you will, we don't determine our variables that we can pass upstream from a platform-to-platform type buy at scale, but we will position them in almost a premium programmatic perspective that wouldn't be biddable. But at least what your opportunity would be is if you saw some of these units, or you had some of these units and you positioned it with, say, video vendor X, Jivox, name whoever, and they had some engagement rates, we would actually go through and put the supply as far as the tags on the publisher sites, and we would actually build the traffic at that at scale. It just wouldn't be for auction, and RTB is a mechanism, if that makes sense.
Can I ask the audience, I just, maybe by show of hands, who thinks that cookies are going to be around in the current state in a couple of years' time? So I tend to agree.
Just see whether they're paying attention. Who doesn't think that cookies will be around in the current state?
Right. So I tend to agree with the five hands that showed up instead of the 2. Thanks for everybody for not answering. So to me, I think where we are today with cookie syncing is working, and I think it's working well. The research we've done show a couple of things. One, cookies are notoriously unreliable. They persist for way longer than they should on machines because people want to keep that audience in target. I can give you a great example. I went out and bought a swing set for my kids a year ago, and I'm still getting ads for swing sets. I'm not in market for a swing set anymore, for crying out loud, unless a tree falls on it, which is likely in the Northeast this year with the winter we've had. But the point is that cookies persist for way longer than they need to on machines. Secondly, I sometimes share a machine with my wife, which means I land up with ads for Victoria's Secret and Neiman Marcus. Not the right audience for that either. So multiple users on a machine is a problem with cookies as well. And thirdly, and the most important thing to me, is cookies do not transcend devices. Mobile doesn't have cookies. Browsers are starting to stop cookies. So we've got a big problem there if we're relying on cookies as a way to do attribution. And then finally, for everybody here, I'm sure you'd work with global brands, go over to Europe, and you've got massive problems with privacy and cookies there. So cookie as a targeting mechanism, as a measurement mechanism, I think is fairly short-lived. And it's working today, but it won't work, I don't think, as effectively as it's working today in a couple of years. The one thing that I think is becoming really interesting, and a lot of research is being done around it, is this notion of causality, which has existed in many other industries before, which is trying to tie the cause of the conversion back to the event that triggered the conversion. And there's a lot of work being done by Google and by Twitter and by a lot of these big ad tech stacks to try and come up with this unique identifier that transcends device, that doesn't need to necessarily know as much about who you are, but more about what you're doing, and tie that back to an impression. And I think that that's an area that is starting to take on, and we're seeing a lot of the clients we work with on the buy side starting to investigate that. There's a lot of serious analysis going on at a brand level, at an agency level, to determine root cause and, well, what's my return on ad spend? And every brand manager I speak to is, if I invest 100, how much am I going to get out of that 100 investment? I don't think that cookies is an effective way to answer that in the long term.
But there's two questions there, right? The effectiveness of cookies and then how long they'll be around.
Right.
I actually think they're going to be around a little bit longer than we think. Not that they're not effective.
You're right on the limitations of cookies for targeting, right? You've got multiple users on a machine, and cookies get deleted. That's why agencies and advertisers are using the in-flight campaign optimization that's based upon having access to a panel, because then you see exactly who was on the machine when the ad was delivered, and you know the demos. And so while the campaign is running, you're monitoring how the campaign is being delivered. Are you getting the right targeting that you were promised? And by the way, the cookie error is pretty significant, but at least you're getting the information back before the campaign is ended, well before the campaign is ended, and then you negotiate with the publishers of delivering what you want and move away from the ones that aren't delivering. Now that's a pretty hot application these days.
So I've got a couple of comments for Summer. Like, I think what we highlighted earlier, I think your question was about IP addresses, right? Like, why can't we use that? There's a technology limitation, right? Sometimes that the bad actors are actually able to switch out their IP address. That's one piece of it. As David mentioned, it's not necessarily always scalable. And then I think we kind of alluded to it in Europe. Its IP address is considered PII, which means you can't touch it, which means a lot of companies like Google, even on the DoubleClick side, have made it not necessarily accessible for folks like yourselves that want to go mine that data and try and detect that type of fraudulent behavior to do something about it, right? So just want to address that comment. I didn't catch the gentleman's name back there, but I think when we talk about, so I think when we talk about, thinking about measurement, trying to do something proprietary and custom, that's what we all need to achieve to do, because we all have, both the need to be able to scale, to be very broad thinking and know like what the opportunities are and start with a benchmark or a baseline, but be able to dig into what individual client needs are. Our VivaKi approach is to do absolutely the same thing, and using our internal proprietary Skyscraper platform, which is meant to go manage data from companies like comScore, from Integral Ad Science, from companies like Vindico for video, and working with DoubleClick on the ad server side, Atlas, et cetera. making sure that we can actually look at those metrics in a unified fashion and, again, don't have a solution that I could say matches marketer A versus marketer B, and again, is not necessarily geared towards attitudinal measurement, but it's the right starting place, and that's what we're trying to gain ground in, that we're all educating ourselves to, again, not think black and white, but think that there are multiple signals we should be educating ourselves and educating our teams on, and then trying to make more informed decision. And I think what we're still trying to highlight is we're still in that, that build towards adoption and evolution of what these metrics are, what these standards are to be. It's important for us to, grab hold right now and try and learn, as this continues to evolve and help make the standards be put in place. But there is no end-all, be-all solution, and it certainly doesn't behoove us on, oftentimes on the agency side, or for VivaKi, call it a quote-unquote trading desk, to tell the marketer that they shouldn't be measuring clicks, they shouldn't be measuring CPC or CTR. It's our responsibility to consult and say there might be other things you want to look at, and look at multiple things in conjunction. So I think that's important. To just talk about, sorry, I didn't get to speak for a little bit, but so I'm going to kind of go on. One last comment about the attitudinal measurement. I think is very critical, and a lot of what the viewability measurements and signals are meant to do, whether again it's for video ad formats or desktop mobile, really focused on trying to again talk about universal currency, so you can start thinking about offline and online. And certainly attitudinal metrics are a standard today, or have been traditionally, for, let's say, broadcast and looking at that ROI. That's important. A lot of what we need to do on the digital side is have things actionable in real time, right? It's not okay for us to necessarily always run a campaign for 3 months, get a result midway, mid-campaign, and then post-campaign, and then tell the client we failed or didn't fail. There's an expectation in digital that there's a lot of signals and measurement out there, so we got to optimize it. And so I think, again, as tools continue to evolve, that's going to be critical. And as we start thinking about how we can scale attitudinal measurement along with direct measurement, that's pretty critical. It's about actionability and being intelligent with the types of data that are available today and will continue to be available as the marketplace evolves.
Mm-hmm. Nice, actually. Good. Yeah. So, yeah, nicely done. Over here.
I think we touched on this a little bit, but I have worked in the past with clients who maybe have an ad server like MediaMind, and then they also layered on comScore, and then they also layered on integral ad science. And as you know, when you layered on these different technologies, everything counts differently, and you have certain amount of discrepancies. So is there anything we could or should do to kind of get these technologies to work better together? Because there's an IAB standard for measurement, as far as viewability, but you'll see impressions, clicks, and conversion data having huge discrepancies. So what can we do to get them, more cohesive?
Any one of you
just use integral. No, I'm just kidding.
So I'm gonna step in and at least highlight one of the problems there, because we have this at Magnetic, which is that the more hops you have in the decision, sometimes those hops don't even get activated, and some exchanges actually cut off the ability to deliver the pixel that's measuring the tracking. So, we think at Magnetic that the solution is what you alluded to, which is cookie syncs, which is you do one pixel and then you cookie sync everyone in the background, and then everyone's measuring the same impressions. But that, that's a purely technical answer to that. Any of you want to add to it?
Yeah. So I think speaking specifically to viewability, which is what we're here to focus on, there is a recognized kind of consensus in the industry that there are a lot of discrepancy issues. The discrepancy issues exist for a number of reasons, one of which is technically related. The other is different measurement approaches, different methodologies. And the one thing that the MRC is working very hard to do is come up with a way in which they can reconcile the denominator so that everybody at least starts off on a level playing field. You know, some of the things that happen before the actual impression is served impact those discrepancies. We might choose to block an ad because it's deemed inappropriate content. And that could be a discrepancy between us and another measurement company that's running on the campaign, but not for blocking purposes. So there are a lot of hops and there are a lot of steps that go through, and you know, sometimes people are contracting different services from different companies. And so it is something that's recognized, it is something that's been worked on, and it is something that will hopefully resolve itself as viewability becomes more commonplace. But again, you know, and I think Phil mentioned this earlier, we're starting to focus on this now, but we're by no means ending, or we're no means near where we should be, you know, 6, 8, 12, 24 months.
And from a supply side perspective, I want to give you our take on this. This is actually extremely important because I've been in the publishing world for 20 years now and doing websites, and there's nothing that drives us more insane without these standards in place and what the MRC is taking a look at and trying to do. And number one is because it actually creates user experience issues on our end users. The more and more of these pixels we're adding to the payload, the more and more of our customers will go somewhere else because the site latencies and the render time is increased by X variable, right? And then when we try to report back, being in the seller's market, if somebody else is using this and we don't have a matchup, that's what's creating some of the discrepancies that we're also seeing in it. So there's a user experience issue and there's a discrepancy to make sure that we're actually talking the same language on that.
I have another question over there. Yeah?
It's my understanding that regardless of the criteria for viewability or the methodology of measurement, all these measurements occur post-auction. I could be wrong about this. You talked, David, I think, about identifying certain activity in real time. But nevertheless, I'm not aware of a situation whereby you can discreetly bid or not bid on impression and know its viewability at the moment of auction. And I'm wondering when do you expect that would be?
You can do that.
A variable pass.
Yeah, so just so that you don't give an ad for yourself.
Sorry.
So there are services out there that do it. He offers one?
Well, no, I mean, we're open RTB compliant on the exchange, right?
Yeah.
So we do offer, right now we're offering variables of viewability on above or below, but these, because we are compliant with an open RTB specification, as we get more and more technologies and we partner with Integral and we actually bake these in, the transparency gap that the transparency gap that we're looking at to provide that information is much granular details possible.
But that is available. So
okay, so A, you can designate specifically that you only want to buy exclusively viewable impressions.
Yeah.
And then part two of that would be that, of course, there's a possibility in a vast many cases where the impression would not be viewable at the moment, but may become viewable. So that also has potential value as well, and that'd be kind of an interesting piece too. You could perhaps assign a discounted value, a bid for an impression that's not currently viewable, but based on historical probabilities might become viewable as the person scrolls down. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that type of buying, that model exists in two fashions ultimately. One where you're using technology, like Integral Ad Science supports this for some of the bidders out there, and you can basically input and say, I want to only target something that has a high propensity to be in view, right? Nothing's guaranteed in these days, and I think what we're saying is different companies will track viewability in different ways, rightly so, because they all have their secret sauce, their own methodologies. There needs to be evolution in that aspect of pre-bid because in the exchange space, not everything is always able to be categorized for, in this case, Integral Ad Science being able to classify the propensity. So it's definitely out there. It's going to be, I think a lot of this that we're talking about is as you're thinking about different measurement and thinking about what's important for your campaign or your overall business, you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons, right? Sometimes you may negatively impact your scale or price point one way up or down. And again, that's the pre-bid solution is one area that is, again, available, but you may have some cons related to that. And then what we see is occurring, again, sometimes it's just a business decision that publishers are expressing Other cases, they're trying to use their proprietary measurement or third-party measurement to be able to guarantee viewability. And they're not necessarily really guaranteeing if an ad is in view. They're guaranteeing that you may only pay for ads in view. I think we kind of touched on that at the beginning of the conversation that anyone that's currently expressing in that model, there's a lot of risk there, and maybe that's a good value prop for them to market today. But it's going to eventually create a sliding scale on price point over time. And again, the purpose of using viewability as a signal isn't to directly influence price point up or down. It's to make us all informed in the marketplace of how we should be evaluating buy side and sell side. It's going to become it's impacted because the price point will be impacted. It's going to be a symptom of that, but that's not the true intent, right? That we're trying to broadcast for why we should be leveraging viewability metrics.
But when all is said and done, you're still going to have to check it once the campaign is run. I don't think anybody is going to believe that on the basis of what is expected when you're bidding on that impression that, boy, you can take that to the bank and that's your viewability number. I think a sophisticated buyer is going to say, all right, well, now the campaign is run, or while the campaign is running, show me what the viewability is and show me that it was what I bought.
So I'm going to go with one more question, and then I want to have you talk a little bit about your partnership with comScore. I want to have, with Google. comScore with Google. I want to have you talk a little bit about the other thing that Google did, which is to buy Spider.io. And then we're going to go and have a raise of hands to see how many ads our little botnet friend
Hope it was active.
saw. Yeah. We have no idea. So, but before we do that, I'm going to go for one more question in the red back there in the middle. Oh, we have two. All right, I'm going to go with two questions. The guy in the red can go first, and the gentleman in my age group in the back can go second.
Adam from Amnet. So when we're talking about viewable CPMs, due to the predictive nature of trying to measure a viewable impression, can we even really talk about viewable CPMs at this point? Is it a realistic goal for the industry if you're wrapping your text with 3 different leading viewability providers and one comes back with 40%, one comes 60%, one says 70%? How can we, as an industry, say we're going to build on viewability if nobody really not only agrees on the definition, but how to measure and the difficulties behind measuring the geometric or browser, all those different types of things?
Do you want one of them to answer, or do you want me to pick for you?
Anybody.
Why don't we have Phil? You go ahead and answer that.
So sorry, the question I think was, is there going to be a viewability CPM, or do we think there is able to be supported? So the first part of is their ability to track, a cost per viewable CPM. There absolutely is that ability. It's pretty challenging in the end of the day, depending on which vendor you're using and how you're tracking costs, right? And a lot of us, I think, if you're at Amnet, you're using maybe a DSP or an ad platform, or there might be a dynamic CPM. And tracking that on an impression-by-impression basis, which is how oftentimes the viewability is going to be tracked, is a bit difficult. Looking at that aggregated is definitely more easy, so you can say on a given day for a given site, given publisher, given exchange, this is what you're seeing. But I think, again, as technology continues to advance, and in certain cases, certain technology companies are working and collaborating with other technology companies or developing their own proprietary tools, whether on the DSP side, the ad server side, whatever, right? Analytics tools, that there will be an easier ability to look at impression by impression cost per viewable impression. And that definitely is going to then help to answer to the second point that second question that you had, which is, how to then transact against a cost per viewable impression. And that's the toughest part in my opinion. I'm definitely currently responsible for the buy side, but most of my conversations on a daily basis are working with the sell side. And what we need to do is create those standardizations. The standardization is one thing. The actionability and the agreement between buy side and sell side is the second thing. And I still think there, in my opinion, some steps that need to happen that allow more transparency in that measurement, in this case viewability, between buy side and sell side, to make sure that people understand ultimately what was the campaign's strategy, what was their objective and tactical execution, and ultimately if we're going to start talking about billing and bill pay against that, there needs to be more and more data shared, which means there needs to be more enablement of really log-level data and data from multiple technology stacks on buy side and sell side to be shareable. And I think we will get there, but I just think that it's a challenge that we all have to face. And I certainly know other companies that may have ad technology both on the buy side and sell side. That's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to create a single metric that can be used for publishers and buyers that is, whether it's flawed, what that I don't know if it's flawed or not, but if it's in question if they have the best viewability metric, at least it's the same that can be shared across both sides. I think that's what we need to strive for.
Gentleman in the back.
All right, thanks. I just want to first thank the panel for interesting discussion tonight. It's one of the reasons I love our industry, the rigor that we bring into validating what we're doing. It's been a fantastic discussion. Now I want to ask the panel what, if anything, we are doing as an industry, and you in particular, to bring the same sort of rigor into other channels. What are we doing to bring the same sort of viewability measurement or other measurement into TV, print, radio, the other things that command a large chunk of the media dollar out there? What are we doing to bring that same sort of rigor into measurement?
Gian, that's got to be you.
Well, I guess that the viewability effort in digital is important because it's really opportunity to see, right? That's what viewability is, right? Doesn't mean that the person actually looked at the ad, but they had the opportunity to see it. That's the definition that has been used in TV for decades. And so what we're really doing is making sure that we have metrics in digital that are consistent with what's been available in television for some time. So it's not, well, are we now going to put viewability into TV? I mean, it's there. It's been there for a long time.
Same thing with print, though.
Same thing with print.
Same thing with print. I mean,
right.
The circulation and page 6, A ad,
well,
type of thing.
But there, again, remember the way that MRI measures print is, again, did you have an opportunity to see it? Yep. Did you actually look at the page where the ad was? So this in-view or opportunity to see is now being added to digital where it's been in traditional media for decades, which should make it easier for dollars to move across the platforms.
Scott, I'm going to go to you for my penultimate question, which is there's been a bunch of things in this area. One of them is that Google just bought Spider.io, right? So in case we didn't think that people cared about it, they actually went and bought a tiny UK-based 10-person company that was focused entirely on identifying suspicious activity in RTB. What do you think that says? Why do you think they did it? They're a slightly larger company than Spider.io. Why couldn't they do it themselves? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to everyone in the audience?
My thoughts are really twofold on this one. Running an exchange and running an SSP and going through the process of pre-filtering inventory, supply inventory, that comes into our network, and all the tollgate processes that are it's called programmatic, right, in RTB, but you'd be surprised how many actual people are involved in doing this. And it's all the toll gating we do, the validation of sites who have a propensity for large search referrals, social referrals, if they're all coming from one single IP or one domestic geo. This is why, from our perspective, we work with Integral Ad Science. We have other solutions that are third party, and then our own internal forensics units around it. I think one of the reasons why Google went after this is they knew that it was a marketplace that was always going to be leaning on a fraud tech vendor. And twofold, it's also one of those opportunities, I think, that they recognize that, that as long as there's money there, there's always going to be fraud there. Right? That's kind of what we're seeing. And David and I both sit on the TOGI Traffic of Good Intent Task Force for the IAB. And so it's James, right? And one of the things we keep coming back to is that as long as there's money, there's always going to be fraud there. So I think Google looked at it as an opportunity from a marketplace perspective because they could grow this unit. But I also think that they recognize that how hard it is to weed this out because we know how hard it is. And we're not in a position to go buy a fraud tech company at that point. But you see some of the consolidation happening. IS just made an acquisition investment. VivaKi did as well, and they're starting to consolidate, and they're getting bigger and bigger. But as long as there's money exchanging hands, there's always going to be bad guys.
All right, and my last question. So as one of the important announcements, I mean, it happens that Google did I think, just in the last 20 days or whatever, 2 big announcements. One was that, and the second one is actually with comScore. They announced and again, it's not like Google's a little company. They could do lots of things, but they announced a partnership with comScore. Kind of cool. You're here on the panel. Tell us about that.
So what it entails is that Google is going to take our campaign measurement products and bake them into the DoubleClick ad serving platform. It's like, think of it like Intel Inside. So they basically are standardizing on our campaign measurement systems. There are a couple of benefits that I think we're kind of both looking for here. One is that it'll be a fully integrated system. So it'll be clean. It'll make it easier for the buyers to understand what's happening with these campaigns, and it will make it a lot faster because it's all going to be fully integrated. So there's that. But to put this into context, let me tell you, if I could, just take a minute.
Go for it.
How did this campaign measurement system first come about? And it started about 5 years ago when I got a call from one of our clients who happened to be one of the largest advertisers in the world who said, we're beginning to move our media dollars from television into digital, our branding dollars. And our senior management was shocked to discover that there was no guarantee in digital, just like we've been used to getting forever in television. All right? And he said all kinds of red flags went off. Why aren't we getting it? So we'd like you to verify 8 campaigns. We'll tag 8 campaigns. You tell us where those ads are falling within the panel. We did. And the results were eye-opening. And the cookie issue that we're talking about in terms of targeting, I mean, you could just see that these impressions just weren't hitting the demo segments. The frequencies were all over the map, often really high. And then the geography was crazy. Some of these ads, one campaign, I remember half of the ads were falling outside the U.S. when the product wasn't even available outside the U.S. And that then led us to build this campaign measurement system that operates today with probably a several-day delay that's going to become essentially real-time with Google. And what it will do is to tell the agency what segment, demographically and behaviorally for that matter, is receiving the ad impressions, and what's the frequency, and if the client wants, what's the viewability. But reported really, really fast so you have time to then move your dollars around. Because, going back to one of the earlier discussions, there is no way to guarantee up front without doing the check as the campaign is running as to what you're getting. And these advertisers who are spending the big dollars on branding are used to these guarantees in television, which, by the way, occurs after the fact, right? If you don't get what you bought in the upfront, they'll give you make goods. And that's what they're used to getting. And so we're kind of excited about this, not just that Google is kind of, put a check mark against our technology, but that I do think it's going to have a big impact on the movement of these big branding dollars that we've been trying to get from traditional media, moving them into digital.
So I'm going to try and do a dangerous thing, sort of summarize in less than 60 seconds what happened tonight, which I'm sure I will get wrong. The first idea is that everyone's buying audiences, right? And everyone's going to continue to buy audiences. So this idea that you buy a piece of content and hope that your audience is visiting it is gone, and it's never going to come back. And everyone now is buying their own customers or some lookalike version of it or some data, and that's where everything is going. So no matter how many bad things are happening when you do that, they're going to get fixed. And that method of buying is here forever. And it's not good for people who own content, actually. It's good for people who own data. Right? So that's a big sort of fundamental difference. What we've heard from VivaKi is, you need to have an expert on your side. You need to know someone who is sophisticated, because you can't just go do this yourself. What we've heard from Integral is that there are a whole bunch of vendors. Integral would say they were the best. We are integrated with them, but there's a whole bunch of vendors out there that specialize in making sure that you do deliver real ads to real people. And so it's available. It's not perfect, but it's available. What you heard from Sovrn, which I find unbelievably refreshing and great, is that publishers care about this tremendously. So you want to work with publishers who are going to guarantee you some kind of result. These guys have actually walked away from revenue, which is one of the reasons I put them on the panel. Most people don't. There's lots of actors out there who will say, oh, it's up to you to measure viewability. It's up to you to make sure that your ads are being delivered. That's not our problem. You don't want to work with those kinds of people. If you're being sold something, you need to know that you're actually getting what you were sold. And there are publishers out there that really care about this. And those are the guys that are going to win. And what you heard from comScore is back to the future, right? So, right? The things that you cared about when there was no internet are the same things that you should care about today. And there are ways that you can integrate that with your campaign. Hopefully that was a decent summary of what happened. And now we're going to end with some fun. So I'm going to start with orders of magnitude. So if we could start queuing this up, you guys are probably going to want to walk away from the screen. Oh, before I do this, one quick technical announcement reminded to me by my marketing team. Thank you very much. You have checked your coats here. So after this, we're going up to the rooftop, 27th floor, and we're going to have drinks. And hopefully you'll all come. If you don't leave inside 15 minutes, we're going to take your coats up to the top floor, and you'll have to go there to get your coat. If you get your coat within 15 minutes, then you can go with your coat and you can leave. We think you shouldn't bother collecting your coat. You should leave it it's in safe hands. It'll be upstairs. Have some drinks. They're on us. And one of the lovely things about drinks is the more you drink, the more truth is spoken. So talk to all of these guys after they've had a little bit to drink, and they will tell you everything that they have to say. So so now I'm going to, in orders of magnitude, so how many people think that, so this is the botnet, right?
Yeah.
So how many people think that, I don't know, let's go with at least 10 ads were seen by the bot? 10? Okay. More than 100? Still hands up. More than 1,000? Still hands up. More than 10,000? More than 100,000? So the consensus seems to be between 1,000 and 10,000 seems to be the consensus of the room. David, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah. So one thing to point out. So this is a single machine. The average botnet is 10,000 machines, 20,000 machines. Sometimes it can be about as big as 100,000 machines. So if you click on the little pop-up counter there, the little ad counter, We have 2,500, almost 2,600 ads served.
Crowdsourcing right here.
There you go.
Nicely done.
It's a pretty good guess. So if we say 2,500 in an hour, times by 24 from a single machine, times by 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 machines that are serving fraudulent ads, you get a sense of the scale at which these things are operating.
All right.
Do I count creative separately? We don't. You mean in terms of the number of same creatives served from a single campaign? We can count that. We would need to be tied to a campaign. So this is a honeypot. So it's just counting ads. But we can count if this, there were 20 ads from your campaign served fraudulently, we can count that.
All right. All further questions on the 27th floor. Thank you very much.